Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for Benimaru. Epic 7 has changed the way they release their showcase videos, so they're no longer showcasing a week ahead of time, so I don't usually have that 1 week where I can select a day to do the video. Now it has to be literally on the maintenance night where the banner will be live in a couple hours. So I only have time to do it now because of work and all that stuff. So for those watching my videos, apologies for missing a couple of the ML5s and a couple RGB actually. I actually missed a lot, and I don't even know if I can have time to cover Kairon or if I want to cover Kairon. Either way, let's focus on Benimaru, what I think about him and where he kind of fits in the meta right now, Arena, Guild War, and World Arena. So Benimaru is a fire warrior. Let's take a look at the stats here. He is Sagittarius warrior. So speed at 119 is very, very fast. You're just like, hey, does it not look familiar? It does. This is Zahhak's stat line, which at the time Zahhak was the only warrior and is the only warrior until Benimaru. So it's kind of cool that they introduced this back. The speed is very high, crit rate is very high at 27%. The bulk and defense compared to other more sustaining bruisery warriors is much lower, and the attack, as you can see, is not like 1200, but it's not too shabby. It's over 10,000, it's over 1,000, so it's good enough. Imprint concentration is looking really good at 16.8% crit rate, and he does not have like Zahhak's kind of built-in 50% extra crit rate on his S3 and S1. So you'll definitely need the crit rate imprints, but in terms of like getting the attack high, it might be difficult, especially where I'm kind of predicting what he's going to be used and how he's going to be used. Long story short, I think with his kit, I think if you're going to use him in World Arena, he's got to be a bit bruisery. Okay, bruisery as in like you got to be a bit bulky, kind of like back in the day, like a damage, like a counter RB or something like that, but still be able to do damage. I think his artifact will be his best in slot, but more on that in a bit. Either way, I do think that he will have a player in World Arena. I don't think he will be super monumental, and I'll go on and explain why as we're going through the kit itself. But needless to say, I think that for offensive fights like Guild War and Arena, I think he's going to do okay, because the AI has no control on whether or not they do a double turn or extra turn skill. So there is that benefit, but let's yeah. So look at the imprint release is not that bad as well. Is 10% attack for everyone else. But again, I think that you'll probably most likely build him with the crit rate in mind, so that he maximizes his own gear score, because he's not really he's not totally a supportive DPS, although he has somewhat like a bit of a supportive element, but he has to definitely stay alive. So that's the big thing with him, is like he needs to stay alive, and then his mechanics do make him threatening, but it's just like, is it enough? And this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about the skills and think about him. So Benimaru's skill 2, Universal Perception. At the start of the first battle, gain 50 Fighting Spirit. So just like Landy, just like a lot of the Fighting Spirit heroes, starting at halfway. At the start of an enemy's extra turn, dispels all debuffs from the caster and grants a multi-layer barrier for 2 turns before increasing combat readiness by 25%. But if you plus 5 Mola, that's an extra 15%, so it's 40% CR boost. So that's really good. The effect following an enemy's extra turn can only be activated once every 2 turns. So everything above, so getting the multi-layer barrier every 2 turns, that's fine. But basically the dispelling part, right? So as long as you have multi-layer barrier, at least you can't be debuffed. But like, so I guess it's fine. Realistically, it's fine. There's no loophole here. After attacking, when Fighting Spirit is full, consumes all Fighting Spirit to activate Hell Flare. So I do believe, now I know that Rem, for example, Demon Mode, she can't receive debuffs and it can't be dispelled. So like someone like Archdemon Shadow cannot seal it. I'm assuming it's the same for Benimaru, because you're not affected by debuffs at all. So no matter what, there's nothing stopping him from actually unleashing Hell Flare. And Hell Flare is not necessary. Like, you don't need the opponent's extra turn. It's just that the extra turn gives him multi-layer barrier, which gives him a ton of benefits. So his whole entire kit revolves around the extra turn and the multi-layer barrier buff. Okay, so increases hit chance by 50%. So that means that he can hit ice. So that's very good. He can also hit people with evasion with a 20% chance of missing, unless you give him like Symbol of Unity or anything else that gives him hit chance. I think there's a warrior artifact that gives hit chance, if I'm not mistaken. I think we were just talking about this on stream one night. Was it a Runka's artifact or something like that? Something like that. If there isn't a hit chance one for warrior yet, there will be, because every class pretty much has one. But either way, I'm just saying that, like, you know, maybe into Aiden, although I don't think that he's gonna be very strong into Aiden, but it still has a chance to hit people who want to, you know, abuse evasion. At least he has a chance, right? So, but here's the thing, it's that if he's built as a pure DPS, even if he gets the cut or the opponents hold that extra turn, he's gonna sit there and he's going to get one shot by Rylet, one shot by an Aiden, right? Yes, you have 119 speed, but are you fast enough to kill them? Because you still need multi-layer barrier in order to get the hit chance up. So that becomes an issue. I can see where it's like if people draft Celine or Politis, you know, depending on the fight, depending on the counter draft, most players just don't press their non-attack skills into a Politis or into a Celine, and they just hold it, right? So let's say, for example, someone drafts a C. Lilius and you draft a Celine. They can literally just S1 dual attack with, like, you know, someone really bulky, or the whole entire team is bulky, and so your Celine S2 doesn't really do much. So there's that kind of stuff. Or there's a Rimuru on the other team and he can one-shot your Celine by stealing the attack buff if she has the Sword Storm artifact. So stuff like that, right? And then Politis, we've always seen a lot of people hold their skills and they just kind of whittle her down, kill her, and then the threat's over. So I can see that happening with him, and this is why I think that for World Arena, potentially want to build him kind of bruisery with counter set. That's what I'm thinking, because counter set he can at least still gain fighting spirit if he counters, but it's like, it's really hard to pull off, right? Because look at the stat line. It's not the bulkiest of the warriors. It's got the speed, so you can probably put a pretty decent counter set on with really good stats and still have like maintainable speed, like maybe, you know, 200 speed, maybe even 210 if you dropped a bit of bulk or damage. But there's not a lot of room, right? The self crit rate imprint then becomes so much better, because that's why I'm thinking like you will really want to kind of, you know, like you get the crit rate from the SSS imprint if possible. If you don't have SSS imprint, then he becomes much lower value, you know what I mean? And then Hell Flare attacks all enemies with Dark Flame Sphere, penetrates the target's defense by 30%, and when the caster is granted multi-layer barrier, penetrates defense by an additional 30%, so up to 60%. That's like Ludwig's S3. I don't know the damage mods for Benimaru yet. I think that it could be pretty high, because it is still Fighting Spirit based, as in there's still ramp up time. Whereas Milim is like, Milim is like focus, right? Yeah, I think it's focus based. But like someone like Milim, like obviously the S2 was actually a lower damage mod, but it's because she's a mage, and I think that Smilegate had ahead of time knew that she could soul burn and therefore, you know, ramp up the focus really quick. But whereas Benimaru, like his fighting spirit gain is highly like the opponent has to trigger it basically. And then again, if he doesn't have multi-layer barrier, then what about those who debuff him and don't, like, let's say attack down him but don't do an extra turn, right? Like so then he becomes even weaker, so he's really just sitting there. So there's a lot of issues with Benimaru's skill, I think, in World Arena. But like I said, I think his strength will probably be somewhere like Arena, which is what they're showcasing here, and then Guild War, because like Lilius, Lua, C. Lilius I should say, Lua, Ran, they're still quite prominent in Guild War defensive teams. And then of course there's other heroes that can trigger extra turn and extra turns as well. But those are like the main ones, right? So for people who you know, die to those defenses. Like, it would be much harder for those defense comps or the people thinking about the defense comps to come up with a way to deal with it, because again, Benimaru, if his multi-layer barrier skill is activated, he becomes very, very powerful, right? Again, the hit chance, so he's not afraid of ice exactly. He has more damage. He can defense break into the S2, which we'll talk about the turn cycling here. But first things first, I wanted to show that the multi-layer barrier kind of what do you call it? Interaction. So Celilius goes into the vigor S3, right? So S3, everyone is attacked down, and then as the extra turn happens, he cleanses, and you can see that barrier icon on top of his head there. I was going to ask, like Celilius provoked Pillis because he had 50-50 chance of provoking either, you know, Hand Guy or Pillis, because both are dark. I was curious if Benimaru actually could be pushed back, because if he could be pushed back, then it could still make Celilius comps, like if you're playing in World Arena, it could still make Celilius very dangerous. They should get the vigor buff for the whole team and then just push him back, right? Even though you don't get to provoke, but push him back so that another DPS can like kill them. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think he can get pushed back. Based on this reading, again, hit chance increased by 50 is unaffected by debuff. So any debuff and some harmful effects. Now I wish that kind of wording was more clarified. What kind of harmful effects? And I guess CR manipulation would be the only other one I can think of, because I really can't think of anything else. He can't be really skill reset, because he doesn't technically have a cooldown. At least not an active cooldown. So I'm assuming that harmful effect means CR manipulation, CR pushback, right? So that's where I'm like, okay, I guess, right? That's like, then I guess he's made to be a quote unquote Celilius hard counter because it prevents her from pressing her buttons. But then again, it goes back to like, what are the circumstances of, like, let's say an RTA draft, right? You have Benimaru, but you see Celilius first picked, and you want to choose Benimaru. You can't do it too early, right? Because I don't know how much damage he'll do. Like, probably still quite a bit, but like, let's say the team you're fighting against is insanely tanky, right? Like a Robbie on proof, and then you know, see their last Rider Crown and maybe another Aureus holder or whatever. Like, is that, like, would Benimaru run out of steam, right? That's kind of like my question there. And then therefore would he be killed like super easy too, because last Rider Crown, one S3 and an A Robbie, and maybe a dual attack with Celilius into another damage dealer. Does Benimaru even survive? In this showcase, someone drafted Stanny, so like that means like if it was an RTA matchup, Benimaru had to be picked pretty late, right? He'd almost have to be like the last two picks as like a force ban, right? I'm half. This is why Bunny Dom doesn't exactly work 100% of the time either, unless she's on immunity. But it's like it's kind of like that issue, and then Bunny Dom just is not a hard counter to Celilius. Everyone knows that, because like what can she bring, right? Like, because after Celilius anything can be drafted. It's too flexible. So yeah, anyways, this is the S3 animation. I know we're talking about the S2 active, but the S3 animation comes after, actually. Let me jump a bit. So if okay, so going back to this is the S3, right? So this is the S3 here. Show no mercy. So attacks the enemy by slashing their soul, decreasing defense for 2 turns before increasing combat readiness of the ally with the highest combat readiness except for the caster by 15%. So kind of like as a hawk, right? Kind of acts like as a hawk, have a supportive element, but you have no control who to push. It will be the next in line. When caster is granted multi-layer barrier, acquired fighting spirit is doubled. So you can see the acquired fighting spirit is 25. He starts at 50. If it's doubled, it's 50, so 100%. So like the ideal situation is that the opponents press their buttons, his what do you call it, His multi-layer barrier is on. He cuts the turn because he has 40% CR boost. He adds 3s, and then he goes into the Hell Flare. That's the name. The Hell Flare. So it's like defense break S1, assuming your opponents don't have immunity, and then some really crazy S3 crazy extra attack AoE damage, right? So 60% defense pen, not too shabby. And if you are using his artifact and everything plays right, he has an attack buff as well, right? Doesn't need to be granted by anyone, so that's pretty nice. Okay, but again, in World Arena, much more difficult to use. So again, as I was saying, so I kind of jumped the gun by showing the S3 animation. This is the S3 animation, or this is not the S3 animation. This is the S2 animation. This is Hell Flare animation. I didn't even bother pulling the S3 animation. It's just, it's an attack, right? So kind of imagine Milim, but less cool. So Milim's actual S3 versus her S2, which has the actually hand-drawn elements to it. This is the Hell Flare animation. It's kind of nice. It reminds me like a mix of Rimuru though. It has like a Rimuru vibe. Kind of like Rimuru's end shot basically has something like this, some big explosion. Anyways, so in this video that they showcased, that, you know, Stenny gets cleaved, and Last Rider Crow is on Aureus obviously because he receives 21,000 damage, whereas Shu is defense broken and has only 17,000 damage. Stenny takes a significant hit. I don't know what happened with C. Lilius there. Why C. Lilius has... Anyway, these videos are really hard to gauge, I have to say, 100%. But the fact is that you have 60% defense pen if you have multi-layer barrier. Like I said, I think this is pretty solid, if I can say so myself, into a couple of the meta defenses, which is again predominantly having C. Lilius or Lua or what's the name? Ran on defense. Like these are generally like some of the openers on defensive teams. So like that would be pretty cool. I think he might be usable in Arena. It really does depend though, but we'll see. One other thing is that, so for someone like Ran, right? If you pick Benimaru into Ran could RNL twice, and again, depending on how bulky your Benimaru is, you can die, right? Because Ran would still hold his turn even though you did your CR boost. Yes, you would be cleansed, but Ran's S1 has defense pen, and he's self-attack buffed. And if it's someone's really well built Ran and actually has damage, even with 86-85% crit rate, he's hitting fire. So your Benimaru could be like killed. Like, you know, that's why Edward is not even a hard counter into Ran. Ed can't cleanse the defense break, assuming the stigma landed and assuming the defense break landed. So Ed dies in usually 2 hits with a well-built Ran. Benimaru may survive because he can't get defense broken because he cleanse it, right? Or he would be immune to it. But again, like I said, Ran's S3 has defense pen, S1, you know, if you get RNL'd multiple times, I think you're still dead. So I personally would not even bring Benimaru into a Ran comp. Let's say for Arena and Guild War. Again, as I was saying, that it might be the only area of use, but that could be an issue. So that's why I'm still thinking Benimaru, depending on his damage mods. If his damage mods are insane, I definitely think it's worth giving him bulk. Whether it's on counter set to get the extra fighting spirit for longer fights, or to actually get like on speed set, but like with some bulk, right? So you drop some damage or speed with bulk. And his artifact might be his best in slot, but then again, like if you're thinking about sustain, we'll have to see. Like I remember Edward when he was released, people were trying other artifacts too. They were trying Draco Plate for more damage and some sustain, but then Sigurd Safe became the way. Like, is Benimaru one of those as well? Like counter Sigurd, I'm not quite sure, right? I can't really say for sure, but I feel like he can't just be used straight out of the box like the way it's written on paper, because I feel like the way it's written on paper, it feels like, wow, he could deal with C. Lilius, he could deal with all these, like, you know, openers that have 2 turns. But then again, it's always better for a hero to actually take the turn first and decide whether or not they want to. So like that's why the Luas, C. Lilius, Rands are so powerful. is because they get to choose what they want and they get the first turn, whereas Benimaru is a reactionary type hero, and it just becomes more difficult that way. Either way, as skill 1, move out of the way, acquires also 25 fighting spirit. So this is what I was saying, like if you have, wait, did I talk, hold on, sorry, I'm kind of going off track. Multi-layer barrier, yeah, we already talked about that. Okay, fighting spirit is doubled, perfect. Because here again, if you have multi-layer barrier, increases damage dealt, and then you soul burn, it increases the damage dealt even further. So I'm assuming this S1 could be as strong as the Hawk's S1 soul burn, although I can't say. But it also acquires 25 fighting spirit. So again, I think for longer drawn out fights, counter set would be good because maybe they don't want to hit him, right? But then again, like, if you keep looking at it, it's like he doesn't. Even Zahawk has a better chance of being a bruiser because of his extra hit chance and also his extra crit rate being 50%, which is huge. It's super big. It just alleviates so many other stats that he might need for a counter build or counter bruiser build. But I don't know if Benimaru has the ability, even with his 16% crit rate, and that's assuming you already triple S him. Now, speaking of triple S, his warrior artifact. Now, I think this is the talk that everybody's really like, you know, like they want this. So, one, it could be Benimaru's like best in slot. It's just like how a lot of people thought that Ed's artifact was Ed's best in slot. Ended up Sigurd's Scythe is the way, at least right now. And Benimaru, it could be the same thing. Maybe only for AI driven PvP, this artifact might be best in slot. I think RTA, really situational. It's kind of like you saying like Celine has to be on Sword Storm, right? She has to be on her own artifact, but if you don't proc it, that artifact is useless. It's the same issue with Benimaru, I feel. Is that the only benefit is that it grants you that one turn immunity. So realistically, he doesn't ever have to be on immunity set. I don't know if you would want pen set though. Maybe crit set even, but pen set could be good if you're having trouble gaining the fighting spirit to do the AoE. And I would not recommend torrent set. Even if you're going full damage, it just doesn't feel like it's a worthwhile thing for him. Like, why minus 10% of your max HP? I don't think it's a good idea. You're already doing 60% defense pen. Like, my Ludwig is on torrent set, and I feel like it adds a bit, but torrent really amplifies when you get near 100% defense pen. 60%, you definitely can go with like a crit set to get more gear score. Yeah, and I don't know if you want to build a bruiser. I don't think HP or defense set are that good for him either. His base is not incredibly good to merit it in my opinion, but I think crit set might be best in slot for him. Crit set, and if you're using this, you don't need immunity, right? You don't need immunity set. And that being said, the artifact itself, I feel like you would want multiple copies. Ideally, I would keep separate copies. The HP, as you can see, the flat stat is 702. The attack is 195. So the very fact is that this artifact is like compared to like Sigurd's Scythe or something, which has like 270 something attack, it's much lower. But of course, it grants attack buff, right? So at the start of turn, when the caster does not have a debuff, 100% up to 100% chance to increase attack for one turn. If you only have one copy of the artifact, it's up to 75% chance. And then each copy gives you, you know, the equivalent like 5. So you have 15, right? You need 5 copies, so 6 total. So you get the 100% after. Sorry, well, my math is really bad. It's not that, is it? Is it? I'm tired. I'm really tired as I'm making this video. But either way, I feel like this artifact could be also really good for Camilla's current use right now, which is like, you know, Ancient Inheritance, Expos, in some hunts. And with this artifact, like being able to proc without a debuff when to get a turn, like the attack buff part, I mean, it feels like it's kind of nice, you know, like you can like it because it's a self-perpetuating perpetual artifact. It has that guiding light feel, although I don't think it's as OP as guiding light, right? So but either way, I think that this is a good artifact to have. I recommend, if possible, if you're gonna go for Benimaru's imprint anyway, you want to keep multiple copies. So buy the one for Power to Shop, keep it a separate locket. Hopefully you get lucky and you pull a couple. I know my desire meter is very, very strong. When it comes to what I want, the game will give me something else. Happened with Karina's artifact, triple S Karina, and then I got like 2 of her artifact. Everything else was off banner. So anyways, I hope I get lucky for this, because I do feel like this can be artifact to have in the back pocket, granting an attack buff, like not like Alexa's basket where it has like a % proc, up to 100% here. I think it's really big. That's just my opinion. Anyways, that's my thoughts for Benimaru. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, do you think, you know, he's gonna be a RTA meta changer? I personally don't think so. I noted my thoughts on the weaknesses that he has in World Arena, the potential weakness into Ran even on an AI defense. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and maybe there's like a theory craft I haven't really thought of. But I'm gonna end this here for the video recording. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.